Dealing with insurance companies can be a pain in the butt. I know, we do it every day. You might have been dealing with them for a few weeks, a few months, or even a few years. But before I tell you how I would negotiate my own claim with the insurance company, let me tell you a little story about one of our clients named Susie. Susie came to us about 2.5 years after her car crash. And she had been trying to do this all on her own. She had been talking to the insurance company at length about what was going on in her life, but she couldn't get them to budge. She couldn't get them to make her a single offer. She had surgical recommendations, countless doctor visits, documentation about what was going on, but she could not get them to offer a penny when she came to us. She had been missing what the insurance adjuster is looking for. And I kind of think of those things as 3 distinct buckets. The first bucket is your medical expenses. This is not the money that your health insurance is going to pay. This is not your deductible. This is not your copay. This is every single penny that is being charged to you by the hospital or by the surgeon. What you want to do for this bucket is put together a complete, and I'm talking just detailed, crazily detailed list of every single bill, and not just a spreadsheet of those bills. You need the documentation from the provider that shows exactly what the bill is. Don't get lost on what you owe. The important thing is what was charged. This bucket is non-negotiable. They owe you every single penny that was charged to you. Not what you have to pay, not what is due after balances or anything like that. They owe you every single penny. So this bucket is easy. You fill this bucket up with documentation and information that proves exactly what your medical bills are. The second bucket is the lost wages bucket. And this can be a little tricky depending on what kind of job you have. If you are a self-employed person, you're going to need your tax returns. You're going to need 1099s if you get those from some places. You're going to need maybe contracts that you miss while you're out of work. You're going to need a really detailed compilation of everything about your income. But when you put all that stuff together and you can show that you missed the time, they owe you for every single penny of that time that you missed. And that also goes for someone who is employed with a W-2, who gets a W-2 at the beginning in January. If you're that kind of an employee, you want to piece together all of your, not only your W-2s from previous years, but you want to get together your pay stubs. Maybe you only missed 2 weeks of work. Those days should be documented in your pay stubs, right? And if you get paid for those 2 weeks, right? If you have paid vacation, that doesn't matter. The insurance company has to pay you for those paid vacation days that you take also. So don't overlook those days just because you got paid. It's one of the few times where you can get double paid for something like that. And now the third bucket is kind of the gray area, the place where there's a lot of art, okay? And that gray area is, or that gray bucket, so to speak, is your pain and suffering. And so that is the bucket where you're going to make your most argument about, right? So you're going to have this first bucket is full, non-negotiable. Second bucket is full, non-negotiable. Third bucket, this is where you want to, also this is another thing, each bucket requires its own set of documentation. In the third bucket, the documentation you want to have is your personal notes about when you started to hurt, what the pain felt like. It also is going to be reflected in the notes from your doctor. So when you go to the doctor, you tell them that it hurts picking up my kid. Or I can't play tennis, right? It sounds a little trivial to say I can't play tennis, or I can't swing the golf club like I used to, or I wasn't able to swing the golf club the way that I wanted to for 2 or 3 months. But that information matters. Those are where you want to be documenting your pain and suffering. This also, if you have to go to 35 chiropractic visits, or you have to go to 35 physical therapy appointments. Like, what are those things like? The inconvenience of that process is very important. I mean, you have to take off work. You have to find a ride for your kids. You have to do all of these things so that you can then go to the physical therapist for an hour, hour and a half, and do your exercises, be in pain more, be in pain after that. All of those things deserve compensation, but it's just not as easy to articulate a monetary value for those for that stuff. It's easy to look at your medical bills and say, hey, you owe me $11,321.86, right? It's easy to say, hey, you owe me for my 2 weeks of work, you owe me $1,783, right? It's very difficult to say what this number is supposed to be. If you have all of these numbers solidified, right? And you have all of these numbers solidified, now it makes the artful side or the negotiation side a little bit easier because you know that you've got all of these numbers nailed down, right? And so now you're only arguing about this number. So that brings us back to the original question. How would I negotiate with the insurance company to figure out how much money I'm supposed to get, right? Well, the goal in this whole thing is to remove as much doubt as possible. So I'm gonna be my goal is to start way up here with the number, right? That allows me to negotiate in this range, all right? And so I'm going to spend some time looking at all these numbers, getting a number, and then figuring out what that value is worth here. And that could be how many days I was injured, right? Or how many days I was in pain. All of those things you're gonna be crafting on this number. And then you're going to pick a number. And this is where people kind of make a mistake. They let the insurance company tell them what they are going to pay you. And you don't want to let that be the starting point. If they do start with that, right? If they do come to you and say, we're going to give you some medical bills and a little bit of, $2,000 of pain and suffering, you want to have a number that you send back to them that says, no, here's my number, $20,000, or here's my number, $25,000. And so you want to have a starting point. Now you have a place to negotiate, right? And that, hopefully that gap between whatever your hard numbers are and the numbers that you find the value is, the gap between that and what the insurance company is trying to give you is small. If it's not, right? If that number that you have come up with in your head and on your paper and have documented through your 3 buckets, if it's dramatically different, right, than what the insurance company is offering, that might be a time to call a lawyer. But if those things are close, right? If the number that you've documented and you try to figure out is very close to the number that the insurance adjuster is offering, that might be a time to settle your own case. Which brings us back to Susie, right? When Susie came to us, they had offered her 0, not 5, not 10, not medical bills, not this pain and suffering, 0. They had not offered her any money, and she had a surgical recommendation for her shoulder. We got her in the doors, we started our process, we got all of the documentation together for this bucket and this bucket and this bucket, sent our demand letter off to the insurance company, and were able to get her $100,000, the entire policy of the at-fault driver we were able to get. And that is through getting all of that information, getting the bucket number 1, bucket number 2, and bucket number 3 documented and presented to them in a form that they understand. So if you're ever in a car crash, the first thing is to make sure that you're safe, right? And then what I want you to do is go get medical treatment and document every single thing that's going on in your life, how this has impacted your life. Make a note, get medical bills, tell your doctors. The more documentation you have to fill up each individual bucket, the better you're gonna be.